Here is a rule of thumb, again due to David Deutsch. If we can understand something, we can program it. Okay, allow me a moment to unpack that. Here are some things we understand to greater or lesser degrees. We understand simple arithmetic. We know how to add numbers, subtract them. We can divide and do things like factorize. Indeed, we know we understand all this because we can program and then build electronic calculators that do all of these things for us. We have understood much of this for millennia. We understand Newton's laws of motion and his theory of gravity. We can program a computer with virtual solar systems, and with those calculate where a planet will be at any time from now to 1,000 years hence. The formula that allow us to do this have been known for centuries. We have some understanding of chemical reactions as well, and geological processes. We can program computers with these things too, and make some predictions. But here is something we understand far less well: how economic markets work. This is not to say we understand nothing at all, but we know far less than most people seem to think. We cannot, in the scientific sense, predict the behaviour of markets well at all, and indeed we have good explanations as to why such prediction is beyond us. The complexity for a start is too great for us to capture with any simple mathematical theory that could be represented in a computer system. Or a better way of framing this still is, free markets especially contain inherently unpredictable components, because they rely on the choices that people make, and people make choices based upon the knowledge they create. And that knowledge is a genuine act of creation, which means anyone purporting to predict markets is pretending. They are prophesying. They are saying they know what people are going to do. And when I say markets, I mean free markets, of course. We can kind of predict what will happen in the long run to any controlled market. It fails, and a vast majority of people end up in poverty and starving. We know this because a controlled market cannot correct the errors that the authorities controlling them are making at a rate faster than they're making them. The authorities are much slower, always slower, than what the supply and demand changes that occur in the market are. But I digress. In free markets, there are not only too many finely tuned variables, most of which we don't even know, which come to bear on prices and so on, which make prediction intractable, but that many of the variables depend upon, again, the inherent unpredictability of people who are knowledge creators. The multitudinous feedback mechanisms at work here are explained in a very approximate way by economic theories that themselves, if they are at all any good, explain why predicting markets, not only now but forever, is completely infeasible and indeed always and forever intractable. Just for emphasis once again, this is because a truly predictive model of a market would have to account for the free choices people make, and that would mean predicting what a person does. Despite what some economists, sociologists, psychologists, philosophers or neuroscientists might attempt to imply, this is something we cannot do, nor should we desire to. Does this mean market speculation and buying shares and investment broadly and so on is a lost cause? No. One can have a bad, slightly less bad, or a good, or even no explanation whatsoever of what makes a particular company successful, and one can investigate the people in those companies. And although there can never be any guarantees, a scientific type prediction cannot be made, good explanations about products, services, management, and innovation in companies can absolutely inform speculation. It is called speculation for a reason, and it takes deep knowledge in order to be able to make the right investment at the right time. And although predicting the behaviour of a genuine free market is impossible, day to day, week to week, or year to year, the long-term trend of a free market should be for increasing wealth. But this is only ever over the long term, and even a theory that takes into account freedom, optimism, and technological improvement can never guard against the unknown entirely. Disaster can always lurk just around the corner, and, this is key, what is not in a free market, unlike in a controlled or planned market, is coercion. Coercion always and everywhere leads to ruin to a greater or lesser degree. Because coercion is not inherent in a free market, a prediction we can make is, in the long run, a free market economy will always outperform, for a greater number of people, a planned economy. But that theory is a theory about theories. It is a meta-economic theory. And the reason it is true is because in a free economy, people are more free to be more creative. Everything is more free. So How can we improve this creative thinking, which is so important for creating wealth, which improves everyone's life, which is supposed to be the topic? Well, sadly, this is something we know only a very little about. Indeed, one is tempted to say we know next to nothing about it. Human creativity is a truly unique feature of the world as we know it in the year that I am making this, 2021. But human creativity is not the only type of creativity. There's at least one other I'm aware of: evolution by natural selection. Evolution by natural selection creates new species by a similar process of guess and check, or rather, in that case, specifically, mutation or variation and selection. That is a form of creativity, but it is not conscious, it is not thought through. Human creativity is intelligently designed. Biological creativity, the opposite. It is utterly blind. That kind, the biological, is a physical process where genes are rejected by the environment in which they find themselves. If a gene works, it is kept by an organism until it doesn't, and the organism dies, and if that happens enough, the gene, along with its host species, goes extinct. Genes are the unit of selection, and nature is what criticizes. Genes might survive the criticism, or not. A criticism of a gene might amount to the environment changing in such a way as to restrict water. That is to say, a drought happens. In this case, the gene may not survive. Variants of the gene that code for, say, the capacity to survive in less water will survive because the organism survives. In this way, variation within a species leads to speciation. A new species, more drought-resistant than the one before the drought, evolves and survives. But I do not wish to push the analogy too far here. Human creativity and the growth of knowledge approximately resembles this process. A new idea is kind of like a gene. It is typically a variation on an old idea, as a mutation is a variation of an older version of a gene. Most gene variations, mutations, are bad. Most new ideas are bad. But now and again a variant is actually better. It survives the criticisms. In biology, this process is all automated. It is simply an outworking of the interactions between unthinking genes and an unthinking environment. But in people, things are quite different. The basic idea is the same, new things are criticised, but the means by which those new things come about at all is very different. New genes are mutations, and we understand how mutations occur. It is bad copying, and there's all sorts of reasons for this. It could be something as prosaic as a cosmic ray, a particle of light, which hits the DNA and changes it. But how does human creativity work? Here is what we seem to know. Human-type explanation creativity is about making a variation to an existing idea. One cannot wholesale invent ex nihilo, as we say. It does not come utterly from nothing. At a minimum, the idea has to at least be expressible in some form, natural language, paint, a set of numbers. So there has to be some pre-existing thing, some human creation there for one to adapt. But then what? We don't know. And that's the truth, we don't know. If we knew how it was we created new ideas, then just as with programming an artificial solar system in a computer, we could program a computer to do it, to come up with new ideas. And this, by the way, is why we do not have computers that can think. This is why we do not have artificial intelligence, or artificial general intelligence, or AGI, whatever you want to call it. The problem is not the hardware, the physical stuff that the computer is made from. Silicon Valley remains ablaze with the idea that somehow via Moore's law, the idea that computer power, speed and memory is doubling every 18 months or so, is going to precipitate AGI. As though faster computers that can store more stuff, or the internet itself, is about to come alive and start learning, as though it is just a matter of speed and memory. This is completely false. It is not just wide of the mark, it's not even shooting for the right target. So the problem has nothing to do with speed or memory. That is, it has nothing whatever to do with hardware. It has everything to do with software, with the program. We have no program of thinking, which is to say, we have no way of programming general human creativity. We don't know how it works, unlike with arithmetic or the laws of physics, or even, to some extent, the theory of natural selection. We don't know how it works, unlike arithmetic or the laws of physics, or how chemical reactions proceed most of the time. We can, broadly speaking, program those things into a computer and simulate them, but we cannot simulate thinking, which would be thinking, because we don't understand it. And this also refutes the notion, by the way, that even if you think it is about software, for example, that lots of software AIs, which is to say specialized or narrow AI or dumb AI, linked together in some way, will all somehow add up to a general intelligence, as if general intelligence is just lots of special intelligences. But it's not. It's a single unique program for generating explanations. That's what artificial general intelligence is. It's not lots of AIs. It's a single AGI. Very different things. Opposites almost. Single AIs are things that can do one thing, or linking 100 together, a thing that can do 100 things. AGI has no upper bound on the different things that it can learn, so long as it continues to exist. So here's the thing. We have to understand in fine detail how generating explanations, being creative, which is to say how to replicate thinking, works in us, before we can program computers to do it.